3 years in a gray cubicle, answering phones for people who never said thank you. Then one Tuesday morning, Claire Hoffman walked out and never looked back. She bought a used camper van, a road atlas, and a one-way ticket to freedom. But freedom, as it turns out, has a way of leading you exactly where you never planned to go. If stories about finding yourself and maybe finding love along the way speak to you, I'd love for you to subscribe. It really helps keep these stories coming. And hey, drop a comment below. Where are you listening from today? Now, let me tell you what happened when Claire's grand adventure took an unexpected turn on a lonely stretch of Wyoming highway. The engine made a sound Claire had never heard before, a grinding, desperate wheeze that seemed to come from the van's very soul. She pressed the gas pedal. Nothing. The camper van coasted slower, until it shuddered to a complete stop on the shoulder of Highway 287. 20 miles outside a town called Millbrook that she'd never heard of until she saw the sign 5 minutes ago. Claire sat gripping the steering wheel, staring at the endless stretch of sagebrush and empty road ahead. No cars, no houses, just wind and the late afternoon sun turning everything gold and lonely. She'd left Columbus, Ohio 3 months ago with a plan. See the country, find herself, figure out what came next. The plan had not included breaking down in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming, with $800 to her name and a cell phone showing 0 bars. She tried the ignition again. The engine clicked twice and went silent. No, 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 Claire whispered, then louder. No. She got out and opened the hood, even though she knew nothing about engines beyond where to pour windshield wiper fluid. Heat shimmered up from the metal. Something smelled burnt. She stood there, hands on her hips, fighting the urge to cry or scream or both. This was freedom. This was finding herself. The sun dropped lower. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of dust and distance. Claire pulled out her phone again, still no service. She was about to start walking when she heard it. The rumble of an engine coming from behind her. A dusty pickup truck slowed as it approached, pulling onto the shoulder about 20 feet back. Claire's heart hammered. She'd heard the stories, women alone on empty roads. But what choice did she have? The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, tall and lean, maybe late 30s, wearing jeans and a work shirt with the sleeves rolled up. His face was weathered, cautious. He didn't come closer, just called out from beside his truck. "You planning to spend the night out here, or you want some help?" Claire's first thought was relief. Her second was noticing his hands, scarred, capable hands that looked like they'd fixed 1,000 broken things. She found her voice. "It just died. I don't know what happened." The man walked over, slowly, like he was approaching a skittish animal. Up close, she could see his eyes were a faded blue, tired, but not unkind. He glanced at the open hood, then at her. "Jack Remington. I've got a garage in Millbrook." He paused. "Mind if I take a look?" Claire stepped back. "Please." Jack leaned over the engine, touching things, listening to things, his movements efficient and sure. After a minute, he straightened up and wiped his hands on his jeans. "Fuel pump's shot, maybe the alternator too. I can tow you into town, take a better look at the garage." "How much will that cost?" The question came out sharper than she intended. Jack's expression didn't change. "Tow's free. The parts and labor, we'll figure out once I know what's wrong." He looked at her dead on. "I don't cheat people, if that's what you're asking." Claire felt her cheeks burn. "I'm sorry, thank you. Yes, please." 20 minutes later, Her van was hitched to Jack's truck, and they were driving into Millbrook as the sun painted the sky pink and orange. The town appeared gradually, a grain elevator, a few scattered houses, then a main street with maybe a dozen buildings, a diner with a flickering neon sign, a hardware store, a church with a white steeple. The kind of place that looked like it hadn't changed since 1985. Jack pulled into a small garage with Remington Auto Repair painted on the side. He unhooked her van and rolled it into one of the bays. Claire stood in the doorway, watching him work. He didn't talk much, didn't ask her story, just moved around the van like he was having a conversation with it that only he could hear. Finally, he stood up and walked over to a small desk covered in invoices and parts catalogs. He made a note on a pad of paper, then turned to her. "It's the fuel pump for sure. I need to order the part. Won't get here for 5 days, maybe 6. Claire felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. 5 days? I can call around, see if anyone closer has it, but for a van this old. He shrugged. There's a motel down the street, the Riverside. Dorothy Keene runs it. 5 days. Claire did the math in her head. Motel, food, the repair itself. Her $800 might not cover it, might not even come close. Is there a cheaper option? Like, I don't know, camping or... Jack looked at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression, like he was deciding whether to cross a line he'd drawn for himself. There's a spare room above the garage. Used to be storage, but I cleaned it out last year. Has a bed, a hot plate, a bathroom. No charge. He paused. But people here talk, so it's your choice. The way he said it made Claire understand. This wasn't just about money. This was about something else. Something complicated. What do you mean, people talk? Jack's jaw tightened. Small town. I'm a widower. You're a woman traveling alone. They'll make it into something it's not. Claire looked at him. Really looked. She saw the weariness in his eyes, the way he held himself apart, careful and guarded. A man who'd been hurt and learned to protect himself by keeping the world at arm's length. I appreciate the offer, she said quietly. Let me check the motel first. Jack nodded. Fair enough. It's 3 blocks down, on the left. The Riverside Motel was a squat, single-story building with a gravel parking lot and a neon sign that said, "Vacancy," in tired red letters. The office smelled like cigarettes and air freshener. Behind the desk sat a woman in her 60s with carefully curled gray hair and sharp eyes that took in every detail of Claire's wrinkled shirt and dusty jeans. Help you? The woman's voice was flat, unwelcoming. I need a room. My van broke down. Jack Remington's fixing it. Should be about 5 days. The woman's expression hardened. You one of those drifter types? Claire blinked. Excuse me? We don't much care for strangers who don't have roots. Cash up front, 3 nights minimum, $120. Can I pay night by night? No. The woman crossed her arms. 3 nights minimum, cash up front. That's the policy. Claire felt heat rising in her chest, embarrassment and anger mixing into something that made her want to walk out. But where would she go? She opened her wallet, counted the bills. $360 for 6 nights, if she even stayed that long. It would leave her with barely anything for food and the repair. I'll need to think about it, Claire managed. The woman, Dorothy, according to the nameplate on the desk, smiled coldly. You do that. Claire walked out into the cooling evening. The main street was quiet. Just a few pickup trucks parked outside the diner. Through the big windows, she could see people inside, eating and talking. Normal people living normal lives in a place they belonged. She didn't belong anywhere. Not anymore. Claire found herself walking toward the diner. She'd get coffee, think through her options. But when she stepped inside, the conversations didn't just pause, they stopped. Every face turned toward her. She felt like a specimen under glass. At the counter, sitting alone with a plate of meatloaf, was Jack. Claire walked over and slid onto the stool beside him. She didn't look at the other customers, just kept her eyes forward. "I'll take that room," she said quietly. "Just for 5 days." Jack set down his fork. The diner was so silent, Claire could hear the clock ticking on the wall. "You sure?" "I'm sure." Jack pulled out his wallet, left cash on the counter, and stood. "Come on, I'll show you where everything is." They walked out together. Behind them, Claire heard a woman's voice, Dorothy's voice, cutting through the silence like a blade. "That Jack Remington's gonna regret this. Mark my words." The door swung shut, but the words followed them into the night. Claire woke to the sound of metal on metal, the clang of tools echoing up through the floorboards. Morning light slanted through the small window of the room above the garage, catching dust motes in its beam. She lay still for a moment, taking inventory. Clean sheets, a roof overhead, the smell of motor oil and coffee drifting up from below. Not the worst place she'd slept since leaving Ohio. The room was sparse but clean. A twin bed, a dresser, a hot plate on a small counter, and a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. But it was private, and it was free. And right now, that felt like mercy. She got dressed and went down the narrow stairs to the garage. Jack was already working, half disappeared under the hood of a sedan that wasn't hers. He didn't look up, but his voice carried over the sound of whatever he was doing. Coffee's in the pot, cups in the cabinet above. Claire found the small break area tucked in the corner, a coffee maker, a mini fridge, a microwave on a folding table. She poured 2 cups and brought one over to where Jack was working. When she cleared her throat, he slid out from under the hood, wiping his hands on a rag. "Thanks," he said, taking the cup. His eyes flicked to hers briefly, then away. They stood there in awkward silence. Claire searched for something to say that wouldn't sound stupid or overly grateful or intrusive. "How long have you had the garage?" 10 years. Built it with my wife." The words came out flat, factual. Not an invitation to ask more. "I'm sorry for your loss." Jack nodded once, set the coffee down, and turned back to the sedan. Conversation over. Claire went back upstairs, feeling like she'd stepped on something fragile. She spent the morning organizing her things, reading a book she'd picked up in Colorado, trying not to feel like a burden. Around noon, she heard voices downstairs, Jack and another man, their conversation drifting up in pieces. "Well, I saw you leave the diner with her last night." "Harvey, don't start." "I'm not starting anything. Just saying people noticed." "People always notice." There was a long pause. Then the other man, Harvey, spoke again, quieter. "It's been 2 years, Jack. Sarah wouldn't want you living like a ghost." "Sarah's not here to want anything." The words hit like a hammer. Claire stood frozen, holding her book, feeling like an intruder in a grief that wasn't hers to witness. She heard the bay door roll open, then closed. Footsteps. Silence. That afternoon, needing to feel useful, Claire walked into town to buy supplies. The general store was at the end of Main Street, a weathered building with a creaking porch and a bell that jangled when she opened the door. Inside, it smelled like old wood and dust and something sweet. Penny candy in jars by the register. A woman stood behind the counter, younger than Dorothy, but with the same hard, evaluating stare. Claire picked up bread, peanut butter, apples, crackers. Basic things. She brought them to the counter and smiled. The cashier looked at the items, then at Claire. She didn't move to ring them up. "We serve locals and tourists," the woman said. "You don't seem like either." Claire's smile faltered. "I'm sorry?" "You're kind. Drifters, passing through, taking advantage of people's kindness. We don't need that here." Heat flooded Claire's face. "I'm not taking advantage of anyone. My van broke down. I'm waiting for a part." "Sure you are." The woman crossed her arms. "You can shop somewhere else." "There is nowhere else. That's not my problem." Claire stood there, the humiliation burning through her like acid. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, to make this stranger understand that she wasn't whatever ugly thing she was imagining. But the woman's face was closed, decided. Claire left the items on the counter and walked out. She made it 2 blocks before the tears came. Not loud, just silent tracks down her cheeks that she wiped away angrily with the back of her hand. She'd left her entire life behind to escape feeling invisible, worthless, stuck. And here she was, 3 months later, being treated like garbage in a town where she didn't even want to stay. Claire found herself at a small park by the river. Just a few picnic tables and a walking path. Cottonwood trees rustling overhead. She sat at the farthest table and let herself cry properly. For the job she'd hated, but at least understood. For the apartment she'd given up. For the person she'd thought she'd become by now, confident, free, certain. Instead, she was broke and stranded and more lost than ever. Rough day? Claire's head snapped up. Jack stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable but not leaving. She wiped her face quickly. "How did you know where I was?" "Small town. Harvey saw you walk past the hardware store looking upset." Jack sat down at the other end of the table, keeping distance between them. What happened? Claire told him about the store, about the cashier's refusal to serve her. Jack's jaw tightened, but he didn't look surprised. "That's Linda Morrison. Her sister's married to Dorothy's nephew." He said it like that explained everything. Maybe it did. "I don't understand this place," Claire said. "I'm just passing through. Why does everyone act like I'm a threat?" Jack was quiet for a long moment, watching the river move past. When he spoke, his voice was low, careful. "My wife Sarah died 2 years ago. Cancer. Took 18 months from diagnosis to the end." He paused. "This town loved her. And when she died, they decided how I should grieve. How long it should last. What was respectful and what wasn't." He glanced at Claire. "Dorothy Keene brought me casseroles for 6 months. Showed up at my door, sat in my kitchen, talked about Sarah like she'd been her best friend. She wasn't, but she wanted to be something else." Understanding dawned cold and clear. She wanted to be the next Mrs. Remington. I didn't want anyone to be the next anything. I told her that. Gently at first, then not so gently. Jack picked up a small stone from the table, turned it over in his fingers. She didn't take it well. Started small, telling people I was disrespecting Sarah's memory by not moving on properly, whatever that means. Then escalated. Made it her mission to make sure I stayed alone, stayed frozen in place. Like I'm supposed to be a monument to my grief instead of a person still living. Claire felt something shift in her chest. Anger on his behalf, recognition of something familiar. "I'm not helping by being here. No, Jack agreed. You're not. You being here gives Dorothy exactly what she wants. An excuse to make my life harder, to paint me as someone who's forgotten Sarah, dishonoring her memory. He looked at Claire directly. But here's the thing. I'm tired of living according to someone else's script. Sarah and we built that garage together. It's mine now. The room upstairs is mine. My life is mine. And I'm done letting Dorothy Keene or anyone else tell me how to live it. They sat in silence as the sun moved lower, painting the cottonwoods gold. Fireflies began to emerge, tiny lights in the growing dusk. Claire felt the weight of his words, the courage it took to speak them. In Ohio, she'd been invisible. Here she was too visible, but for the wrong reasons. Maybe that was the price of trying to be seen. Sometimes people saw you and decided they didn't like what they found. Thank you, Claire said finally, for the room, for not treating me like I'm nothing. Jack stood, brushing dust from his jeans. Come on. I'll walk you back before Dorothy sends a search party. They walked through town as the streetlights flickered on. When they passed the diner, Claire glanced through the window and stopped. Inside, Dorothy sat at a large corner booth surrounded by at least 6 other people, all leaning in like conspirators. As if sensing eyes on her, Dorothy looked up and met Claire's gaze through the glass. Her expression was triumphant, satisfied, like she'd already won something Claire didn't even know they were fighting over. Jack saw it too. Ignore her. But Claire couldn't shake the look on Dorothy's face as they walked back to the garage. It wasn't just dislike or judgment. It was something sharper, more deliberate. Dorothy wasn't just protecting Jack from an outsider. She was punishing him for rejecting her, and Claire was the weapon she'd been waiting for. 3 days passed in an uneasy rhythm. Claire helped around the garage, answering the phone, organizing parts, sweeping the bays. Jack worked mostly in silence, but occasionally he'd explain what he was doing, show her how an engine worked, let her hand him tools. It wasn't conversation exactly, but it was companionship, more than she'd had in months. She noticed small things. How he always made sure there was fresh coffee in the morning. How he left the local newspaper on the break table for her to read. How his shoulders seemed less tense when she was around, like he was remembering what it felt like not to be alone. On the 4th morning, Claire came downstairs to find Jack's face grim. He was on the phone, his voice tight and controlled. I understand. Yes. Tomorrow at 10, I'll be there. He hung up and stood there, gripping the edge of the desk. Jack, what's wrong? He turned to face her. That was the county office. Someone filed a complaint about my business practices. They're suspending my county contract pending a review. What? Why? The contract is for servicing county vehicles, sheriff's department, road maintenance, that kind of thing. It's half my income. Jack's voice was flat, but Claire could see the fear underneath. They said there were concerns about my professional conduct and moral character. Claire felt ice in her stomach. Dorothy. Probably, or someone she convinced. Jack sat down heavily in his desk chair. The review process takes weeks, maybe months. In the meantime, no county work. And in a town this small, if the county won't do business with me. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Other customers would follow the county's lead. Questions would be asked. Suspicions would grow. The garage, the thing he and Sarah built together, could crumble around him. And it was because Claire was here. Before she could speak, the bay door opened. Dorothy walked in, dressed like she was going to church. Pressed skirt, pearls, hair perfect. Behind her came a man in his 50s wearing clerical collar. "Jack," Dorothy said, her voice dripping false concern. "Father Walsh and I wanted to speak with you about the situation." Father Walsh looked uncomfortable, like he'd rather be anywhere else. But he'd come, which meant Dorothy had leverage even over him. Jack stood slowly. "Dorothy, Father, what situation would that be?" Dorothy's eyes flicked to Claire, then back to Jack. "The church board has concerns about your living arrangement, about the example you're setting for the young people in our community. And now, with this county matter." She shook her head sadly. "We're only trying to help, Jack. Trying to protect you from making decisions that could ruin everything you and dear Sarah built." The way she said Sarah's name, like she owned it, like she had any right to weaponize a dead woman's memory, made Claire's hands ball into fists. Jack's voice was dangerously quiet. "This is my property, Dorothy. My business. My life." Dorothy smiled, and it was the coldest thing Claire had ever seen. "And your contract with the county? The one that keeps this garage running? Sheriff's a good Christian man, Jack. He might have concerns about who he does business with. Moral concerns." She paused. "All I'm asking is that your guest find somewhere else to stay, for your own good." Father Walsh finally spoke, his voice apologetic but firm. "Jack, the appearance of impropriety can be as damaging as the real thing. Perhaps Miss—" He looked at Claire questioningly. "Hoffman," Claire said. "Claire Hoffman. Perhaps Miss Hoffman could make other arrangements, just until the county matter is resolved." Jack looked at Claire, and she saw it all in his eyes, the anger, the fear, the impossible choice. Fight and lose everything, or surrender and lose himself. Dorothy turned to leave, satisfied. "I'm sure you'll make the right decision, Jack, for Sarah's sake." The door closed behind them. The silence they left behind felt suffocating. Claire went upstairs and started packing. Jack found her folding clothes into her duffel bag, moving with the mechanical precision of someone who'd done this too many times before. He stood in the doorway of the small room, not entering, just watching. "You don't have to go." Claire didn't look up. "Yes, I do." She folded a shirt, placed it carefully in the bag. "The part for my van came in yesterday. You installed it this morning. I can leave." "Claire, this town is your home, Jack. Your life, your business. Everything you and Sarah built together." Now she did look at him, and her eyes were dry but fierce. "I won't be the reason you lose it all. Dorothy wins if I stay. At least if I go, you have a chance to fix things with the county." Jack stepped into the room. The space was so small that he was suddenly close. Closer than they'd been before. Claire could see the lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his dark hair, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. "What if I don't want you to be just passing through?" His voice was rough, uncertain. "What if I want you to stay?" The air between them felt charged, heavy with everything they hadn't said over the past 5 days. Claire thought about the coffee he made every morning, the way he'd shown her how to read engine diagnostics, the quiet companionship that had grown between them in the spaces where words didn't reach. She thought about how, for the first time since leaving Ohio, she'd felt like she was somewhere instead of just running away from somewhere else. But she also thought about the look on his face when the county called, the fear, the weight of everything he stood to lose. "I can't be the reason you lose your home," Claire said quietly. "I've been running for 3 months trying to figure out who I am. But I know who I'm not. I'm not someone who destroys other people's lives just by existing in them. Jack's jaw worked. He looked like he wanted to argue, to fight, to find the words that would make her stay. But they both knew the truth. In a town like Millbrook, Dorothy's poison would keep spreading until there was nothing left. "The money," Jack said finally, "for the repair. It's $400. But I'm only charging you $2. Jack, that's not $200. That's the deal." His voice was firm. "You helped me this week. Organized the whole filing system, answered phones, made this place run smoother than it has in months. That's worth something." Claire wanted to argue, but she saw the pride in his eyes. He needed to give her this. Needed to feel like he'd helped her the way she'd helped him. She nodded. They stood there in the small room as the afternoon light shifted toward evening. Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. "Take this too. For the road." "Jack, I can't." "You can. You will." He pressed it into her hand. "You gave me something this week. Let me give you something back." Claire felt tears threatening, but fought them down. She'd already cried enough in this town. Instead, she set down her duffel bag and did something she'd wanted to do for days. She stepped forward and hugged him. Just held on for a moment, feeling his surprise, and then his arms coming around her, careful and strong. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me." Jack's voice was quiet against her hair. "Thank you for reminding me I'm still here." They pulled apart. Jack cleared his throat, stepped back into the doorway. "I'll have the van ready by morning, 5 a.m., if you want to leave before the town wakes up." Claire nodded. She didn't trust her voice. Jack left. Claire finished packing, then lay down on the bed fully clothed and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion finally pulled her under. She woke at 4:30 to darkness and silence. She gathered her things, took one last look at the small room that had been a haven, and went downstairs. Jack was already there, working under the hood of her van by the light of a trouble lamp. When he heard her footsteps, he straightened up. "Oil changed, tire pressure checked, filled your tank." He wiped his hands on a rag. "Should get you wherever you're going." Claire loaded her bags, paid him the $200, and stood by the driver's door. Dawn was still an hour away. The town slept around them, unaware that she was leaving, that this small crisis was resolving itself in the way Dorothy had wanted all along. "Where will you go?" Jack asked. Claire thought about it. "West. Maybe Oregon. Maybe the coast. I don't know yet. That's the best kind of travel, not knowing." She smiled sadly. "Is it? Feels like I've been not knowing for a long time now." Jack reached out and squeezed her shoulder briefly, then let go. "You'll figure it out. And when you do, it'll be because you found it yourself, not because someone told you who to be." Claire got in the van, started the engine. It purred to life, smooth and reliable. Jack had fixed it perfectly. Fixed it so she could leave. She pulled out of the garage onto the empty street. In her rearview mirror, she watched Jack standing in the doorway, a solitary figure in the pre-dawn darkness. Getting smaller and smaller until she turned the corner and he disappeared. 20 miles outside Millbrook, as the sun started to break over the horizon, Claire pulled into a rest stop. She needed coffee, needed to think about where she was actually going now. The rest stop was nearly empty. Just a couple of truckers and an elderly woman sitting at one of the picnic tables outside, feeding crackers to a small dog. Claire got coffee from the vending machine and sat at the next table over. The woman looked up and smiled. The kind of open, friendly smile that Claire had almost forgotten existed. "Morning, dear. Traveling alone?" "Yes, ma'am." Brave thing, a young woman on her own like that. The woman broke off another piece of cracker. "I'm May. This is Buttons." The dog wagged enthusiastically. Claire felt something in her chest loosen slightly. "Claire, nice to meet you." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then May said, "Where you headed?" "I'm not sure yet. Just left a town called Millbrook." May's expression changed, surprise, then something knowing. "Millbrook? That's my hometown. Haven't been back in years, though. Too many old memories." She studied Claire. "You know Jack Remington?" Claire's heart stuttered. Yes, he fixed my van." May's eyes softened. Good man, Jack. That whole situation with his wife was a tragedy. And what Dorothy Keene's been doing to him since, well, that's just cruel. Claire set down her coffee. "What do you mean?" "Dorothy had her sights set on Jack the minute Sarah got sick. Oh, she played it like concern, like neighborly help. But everyone could see what she really wanted." May shook her head. "Jack's not a fool. He knew. And when Sarah died and he made it clear he wasn't interested, Dorothy turned mean. Spread rumors, made his life difficult, used that church board like her personal attack dog. But why would people listen to her? Because Dorothy's family's been in Millbrook for 4 generations. She's got connections, influence, and more bitterness than any one person should carry." May looked at Claire carefully. "She filed that county complaint, didn't she? Because of you?" Claire felt like she'd been punched. "How did you know?" "Because that's what Dorothy does. She finds a weapon and uses it." May reached over and patted Claire's hand. "That man nursed his wife for 18 months, dear. Closed his garage some days just to sit with her. Held her hand through every treatment, every bad night, every moment of fear. And when she passed, Dorothy swooped in like a vulture. When Jack didn't fall into her arms out of grief and loneliness, she decided if she couldn't have him, she'd make sure he stayed miserable and alone." Claire's hands were shaking. "I left. I thought if I left, she'd stop. He could fix things with the county." May's expression was sad and knowing. "Oh, honey, Dorothy doesn't stop. She won't be satisfied until Jack's completely broken. Your leaving might buy him a week, maybe 2, but she'll find another excuse, another way to hurt him." She paused. "The question is, do you care enough to go back and fight?" Claire stared at the old woman. "I barely know him. We spent 5 days together." Sometimes 5 days is enough to see what matters. May stood up, gathering Buttons into her arms. "I'm heading into Millbrook this morning, actually. Going to visit my sister. If you wanted a reason to turn around, you could follow me back. Strength in numbers and all that." Claire looked at the road stretching west, toward Oregon and the coast and all the places she'd thought she wanted to see. Then she thought about Jack standing alone in the garage doorway, disappearing in her rearview mirror. Thought about the coffee he made, the way he'd listened by the river, the quiet way he'd seen her when everyone else in that town looked through her or past her or at her with suspicion. She'd left Ohio to find out who she was. Maybe the answer wasn't in the destination. Maybe it was in the choice to stop running and stand still, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Claire pulled out the envelope Jack had given her. Inside was $500 in cash and a note written in careful, blocky handwriting. "For the road. You helped more than you know. Hunter J., $500. More than the repair had cost. more than she'd earned in a week of organizing and answering phones. It was a gift, a goodbye, and an apology all at once. Claire made a decision. She turned her van around. May smiled like she'd known all along what Claire would choose. "Follow me, dear. And welcome back to Millbrook. Things are about to get interesting." The drive back felt different than the drive away. Claire's heart hammered with nerves and something that felt dangerously close to hope. She had no plan. No idea what she'd say or do when she got there. She just knew that leaving Jack to face Dorothy alone was wrong. He'd stood up for her when the town wouldn't serve her. He'd given her a place to stay when she had nowhere else. And he'd let her go because he thought that's what she needed. But what she needed, what they both needed, was to stop letting Dorothy Keene write their stories. When they reached Millbrook, May pulled into a small house on Maple Street and waved Claire on. Jack's house is on the edge of town. Blue farmhouse, white fence, can't miss it. Claire drove through the waking town, past the diner where early morning customers were filtering in, past the church with its white steeple, past the garage where she'd spent 5 days learning that home wasn't always a place you planned to find. Jack's farmhouse sat at the end of a gravel drive, modest and well-kept, with a porch that wrapped around the front. Through the front window, Claire could see a single light burning. She parked her van and sat there for a moment, gathering courage. Then she saw him, Jack sitting in the dark living room, just a silhouette in an armchair. Not moving, not doing anything. Just sitting there like a man who'd given up. Claire got out of the van and walked up the porch steps. She raised her hand to knock, then stopped. What right did she have to walk back into his life? What if leaving had been the smart choice and coming back was just selfish? But then she thought about the note. "You helped more than you know." Maybe he needed help again. Maybe they both did. She knocked. The door opened. Jack stood there, surprise and confusion, and something that looked like hope warring on his face. "Claire, what are you? You left. I saw you leave." "I came back." She stepped closer. "I didn't leave Ohio to keep running, Jack. I left to find something real. And this is the most real thing I've found." Jack's expression cracked. "Claire, you don't understand. The county thing, it's not going away. Dorothy won't stop. If you stay, then we fight. Together." Claire's voice was steady now, certain. "I'm tired of letting people like Dorothy tell me I don't belong somewhere. And you should be tired of it too." Jack looked at her for a long moment, and Claire could see every emotion crossing his face. Fear, hope, exhaustion, something that might have been relief. Finally, he stepped back out and opened the door wider. "Come in. We need a plan." They sat at his kitchen table as morning light filled the room. Jack made coffee while Claire told him about May, about Dorothy's history of vindictiveness, about the realization that leaving wouldn't solve anything. "She won't stop until you're broken," Claire said. "And I won't be the reason she wins." Jack set a mug in front of her. "So what do we do? The county review is already in motion. Father Walsh and the church board are watching. Half the town thinks I've lost my mind." He sat down across from her. "How do we fight that?" "We tell the truth. Publicly. In front of everyone." Claire wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "When's the next town gathering?" "Church tomorrow. Sunday service, then the community meeting after." Jack's eyes widened. "You want to confront Dorothy at church?" "I want to stop letting her control the narrative. She's been telling your story for 2 years. Maybe it's time you told your own." Jack was quiet, turning his coffee mug in slow circles. "If we do this and it doesn't work, I lose everything. The garage, the house, my place here. This is all I have left of Sarah. If you don't do it, you lose it anyway. Just slower." Claire leaned forward. "Jack, I spent 3 years in a job that made me invisible. I was so afraid of being seen, of taking up space, of mattering to anyone that I just disappeared into the walls. Then I left, and I thought that was brave. But it wasn't. It was just more running." She met his eyes. "Standing still when everything in you says to run. That's the brave thing. That's the hard thing." Jack studied her, and she could see him weighing it, measuring the risk against the cost of doing nothing. "Okay," he said finally. "We do it together." They spent the rest of Saturday preparing. Harvey stopped by around noon, saw Claire, and let out a low whistle. "Thought you left town." "Changed my mind," Claire said. Harvey looked between them, then grinned. "Good. Dorothy's been insufferable all morning, and this should be interesting." Word spread fast in a small town. By evening, everyone knew Claire was back and staying at Jack's house. The phone rang twice, once with a hang-up, once with Father Walsh asking gently if Jack was certain about tomorrow, if he'd thought it through. "I've thought about nothing else for 2 years," Jack told him. "I'll see you at the meeting, Father." Sunday morning arrived cold and clear. Jack and Claire drove to the church together in his truck. And when they walked up the steps side by side, conversation stopped. People stared. Dorothy, standing near the entrance in her Sunday best, went pale and then red. "Jack Remington, what is the meaning of—" "We'll talk inside, Dorothy," during the meeting. Jack's voice was calm but firm. He held the door for Claire, and they walked in together. The service was excruciating. Claire could feel eyes on the back of her head, hear the whispers that weren't quite quiet enough. Father Walsh's sermon was about forgiveness and community. And Claire wondered if he'd chosen it specifically for today, or if it was just cosmic irony. When the service ended, people filtered into the fellowship hall for the community meeting. It was a monthly gathering where town business was discussed: street repairs, school funding, church maintenance. Usually boring and sparsely attended. Today the room was packed. Dorothy sat in the front row, surrounded by her supporters. May had arrived and positioned herself in the back, giving Claire an encouraging nod. Harvey sat near the middle, arms crossed, ready for a fight. Father Walsh called the meeting to order and went through the usual agenda items. But everyone was waiting. Finally, Dorothy stood. "Before we close, I'd like to address a matter of community concern." Here it comes, Claire thought. We've all watched Jack Remington these past 2 years with sympathy and concern. Losing Sarah was a tragedy for all of us. But recently, Jack's behavior has raised questions about his judgment and character. Taking in a drifter, a woman with no ties to this community, no history we can verify. Her name is Claire Hoffman. Jack stood up, his voice carrying across the room. And she's not a drifter. She's someone whose van broke down and needed help. Dorothy's smile was cold. Of course, help. Is that what we're calling it? Jack, I understand you're lonely, but bringing a stranger into your home, into your business, it reflects poorly on Sarah's memory. Don't. Jack's voice cracked like a whip. Don't you dare use Sarah's name to justify this. The room went deadly silent. Jack walked to the front, and Claire saw his hands shaking, but his voice was steady. 2 years ago, my wife died after 18 months of fighting cancer. I was there for every treatment, every bad day, every moment of fear and pain. When she died, this community rallied around me. You brought food, sent cards, offered prayers, and I was grateful. He paused. But somewhere along the way, your support turned into surveillance. Your concern became control. You decided how long I should grieve, how I should live, who I should be. And when I didn't fit that image, you made me pay for it. Dorothy stood. Jack, that's not fair. We only wanted... You wanted me to marry you. The words hung in the air like a grenade. You made it clear, Dorothy. 6 months after Sarah died, you showed up at my door and told me that Sarah would want me to move on with someone who understood me. Someone who loved this town the way she did. You meant yourself. Dorothy's face drained of color. People were murmuring now, shock rippling through the crowd. I said no, Jack continued, as kindly as I could. But you didn't stop. You kept pushing, kept inserting yourself into my life. And when I finally told you plainly that I wasn't interested, you got angry. You started finding ways to make my life difficult. Small things at first. Gossip, cold shoulders, turning people against me. Then bigger things. And when Claire showed up, you saw your opportunity. This is ridiculous, Dorothy sputtered. I filed a legitimate complaint with the county. Based on what? Claire stood now, her voice clear and strong. Based on the fact that Jack gave me a place to stay when I had nowhere else to go? Based on him being kind to a stranger? She looked around the room. I left Ohio 3 months ago because I was tired of being invisible. Tired of living a life that didn't mean anything. I thought traveling would help me figure out who I was. But you know what I found? That running away doesn't solve anything. And that people like Dorothy Keene exist everywhere. People who think they have the right to control other people's lives, to punish them for not doing what they want. May stood in the back. I've known Dorothy Keene for 50 years, and Jack's right. When she wants something and doesn't get it, she turns mean, always has. She looked at Dorothy. You did this to Paul Henderson when he wouldn't give you that land deal. Did it to the Miller family when they wouldn't vote your way on the school board. Now you're doing it to Jack. Other voices joined in. People sharing their own experiences with Dorothy's vindictiveness, her manipulation, the way she wielded her family name like a weapon. Dorothy's face was scarlet. You're all turning on me? After everything my family's done for this town? Your family built businesses here, Harvey said, standing. But that doesn't give you the right to destroy people who don't fall in line. Father Walsh finally spoke, his voice sad but firm. Dorothy, I should have said something sooner. The church board had doubts about your complaint, but you pushed so hard. He looked at Jack. I'm sorry, Jack. The county matter will be reviewed, but I'll make sure they understand the context. Dorothy looked around the room at the faces turning away from her, the support crumbling. For a moment, Claire almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then she remembered the cruelty in Dorothy's smile when she'd threatened Jack's livelihood. Dorothy grabbed her purse and pushed through the crowd toward the door. Before she left, she turned back, her voice shaking with rage and humiliation. You'll regret this, Jack Remington. All of you will. The door slammed behind her. The room exhaled collectively. Father Walsh cleared his throat. I think we've had enough excitement for one morning. Meeting adjourned. People approached Jack and Claire as the room emptied. Apologies, offers of support, invitations to dinner. May hugged Claire and whispered, Told you it would be interesting. Harvey clapped Jack on the shoulder. About time someone stood up to her. Outside, In the cold sunshine, Jack and Claire stood by his truck. The adrenaline was fading, leaving them both shaky and exhausted. "That was terrifying," Claire said. "That was necessary." Jack looked at her. "Thank you. For coming back. For standing with me. Thank you for letting me." They drove back to Jack's house in comfortable silence. The fight wasn't over. There would still be the county review, still be people who sided with Dorothy, still be complications and consequences. But something had shifted. The story had been rewritten. 3 months later, Claire stood in the garage wearing coveralls with her name embroidered on the pocket. Jack had taught her the basics of engine repair, and she discovered she was good at it. Really good. The organizational skills from her old job translated surprisingly well to managing inventory and customer service. The garage had never run more smoothly. Her van sat in the back lot, fully restored, better than it had ever been. But it hadn't moved in weeks. Didn't need to. Jack came up behind her, wiping his hands on a rag. "Thinking about leaving?" Claire turned to face him. They'd been careful these past months. Separate houses, professional boundaries, letting the town adjust to Claire being a permanent fixture rather than a scandal. But something had been growing between them, patient and certain. "I was thinking about staying," she said. "Officially." Jack's eyes searched hers. "Yeah?" "Yeah." Claire gestured at the garage, at the town beyond. "I quit my job to find out who I was. Turns out I'm someone who fixes things. Engines, filing systems." She smiled. "Broken people. I'm not broken anymore. Neither am I." Jack reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. It was the first time they'd touched since that morning in the small room above the garage, but it felt like coming home. "The van," Jack said. "What do you want to do with it?" Claire thought about it. The van had represented freedom, escape, the open road. But freedom, she'd learned, wasn't about movement. It was about choice. And she was choosing this man, this town, this life they could build together. "I have an idea," she said. The next week, on a sunny Saturday afternoon, Jack rolled the van into the main bay. Claire watched as he carefully painted letters on the side in bold, confident strokes. Hoffman and Remington Automotive. Her name, right next to his. Claire ran her fingers over the fresh paint, feeling the texture of it, the permanence. When she'd left Ohio, she'd been looking for a destination. Instead, she'd found a partnership, a purpose, a place where being visible didn't mean being vulnerable. "What do you think?" Jack asked. "Jack, ours?" Claire looked at the van, the vehicle that had broken down and brought her here, that had represented leaving and searching and running. Now it represented something else. Staying, building, choosing. "I think it's perfect." That evening, they stood on Jack's porch watching the sun set over the prairie. The town stretched out below them, lights beginning to flicker on in windows. Millbrook hadn't magically transformed. Dorothy still lived here, still held grudges, still had her supporters. But the story had changed. Jack was no longer the grieving widower, frozen in time. Claire was no longer the suspicious outsider. They were Hoffman and Remington, business partners building something together. "You ever wonder what would have happened if your van hadn't broken down?" Jack asked. Claire leaned against the porch railing. "All the time. I'd probably be in Oregon by now, or California. Somewhere coastal, still searching for whatever I thought I was looking for. And now? Now I know that what I was looking for was never a place. It was this: being seen, being valued, being part of something that matters. She looked at him. It was you. Jack moved closer, and this time when he reached for her, it wasn't tentative or careful. It was certain. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. "I didn't think I'd feel this again," he said quietly. "Didn't think I deserved to. Sarah would want you to be happy. I know. It just took me a while to believe it." He smiled, and it transformed his whole face. The wariness gone, replaced by something open and hopeful. "You changed my route too, Claire Hoffman." "Good," she whispered, "because I'm not going anywhere." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and deep purple. In the distance, the lights of the garage glowed warm and steady. Hoffman and Remington Automotive. A partnership, a promise, a new beginning. Claire had quit her job for traveling, for freedom, for the wide-open road. But she'd found something better. A reason to stop running, a place to call home, and a man who'd shown her that the bravest journey wasn't about how far you could go, but about having the courage to stay.